Hello, I'm Nick. I'm the founder of People.io, and as Vanessa mentioned, had the great fortune of being named Nasdaq Rising Star. Insight, Times Square billboard takeover has zero effect on your web traffic. So what we're doing is kind of trying to solve this big problem statement. Companies want data, and people need control. We used to say people want control, and then everyone said, well, actually, no, people don't really give a damn. So we'll say people need control for a number of reasons. Now, why do they need control? Because of this. This is the MarTech Lumascape. It's a ton of companies who thrive on the idea of your data, all of your data. And what they're all running towards is this. It's called a unified profile. It's what Facebook and Google sell as their kind of big thing. And a unified profile is taking data from all these different points in your life, whether it's browsing the internet, some CRM data, purchase history, etc. Very similar to this, where you've got some user activity, some login, email address stuff. You kind of look at that and go, yeah, that seems like a good idea. If we know more about our customers, we can bombard them at the right time, and they'll love it. That's a damn good idea. Well, the difference between those two examples is the first one requires big conferences like this and George Clooney to take time away from Nespresso to convince you that you should be buying or taking people's data. The other one, on the other hand, that in fact in this example has less data is the NSA. So what's interesting, and I was with a security researcher a couple of days ago who's ex-intelligence service, and he pointed out the advertising industry does know, for the most part, more than most intelligence services around the world. It's a little worrying, a little scary, and the reason this happens and kind of perpetuates itself, I've got better at kind of masking who this might be. So this anonymous website that will not be named, when you go on there and use this plugin on the right-hand side, it shows you there's actually 84 different companies tracking you. 84 companies hoovering up your data and throwing it into their magical database. And then you get this. Very similar. The MD and I had a bit of a Twitter spat about 12 months ago, so I have no shame in hiding the name of this one. But on the side, you can see 35 trackers, and you think, 35, all right, well, that's less than this other website on the slide before. The difference being, this is in a private browsing window with Do Not Track enabled. And when I confronted him on Twitter about this, his response was, well, look, we actually tell everybody you're agreeing to our privacy policy by looking at this. It's fine. Even though you've explicitly said I don't want to be tracked, it's fine because we've shown you the privacy policy. And they rely on the fact people simply don't read terms and conditions and all of this fun. So luckily, we're in a great position where this new regulation called GDPR will basically rip the core out of the ad tech industry and throw them into entire disarray. There's so many different parts of GDPR and future regulation that are starting to put control back in the hands of consumers. And so what we're doing is trying to take advantage of that moment in time where there's suddenly an opportunity where companies are on the back foot as a result of regulation and various other things and actually start to find a way of putting the consumer back in control. So what we're doing, in short, is building a firewall for people. Now, a firewall for people, a firewall of any type, is only so good as what it sits in front of. So, of course, data is the important thing for this firewall to sit in front of. Now, how do you get people from doing this to actually caring about their data? Well, we know from various research, and this may sound like an obvious statement, I'll keep it simple, you pay them. 18 to 25-year-olds, you simply pay them. You pay them to care about their data. So what we've done in version 1, phase 1 of our bigger vision, realizing you have to get traction first, is we've got a mobile app, so user registers, they take control, and what we've built from a technology and a product point of view is already GDPR compliant. In fact, our lawyer's on the board of Privacy International, so he keeps us in check. And as soon as they've registered and they've taken control, they get paid. And then what starts to happen is they can connect some, like enable location, notifications, etc., and of course, they get paid. Now, like every good millennialized app should have, we have a swipe card interface. And so they just start swiping through different questions. Now, when they're answering one of these questions, they're not just saying yes and no. we're actually taking a whole load of data about the interaction. So for example, if they're going too fast, you might make an assumption they're trying to gain the system. If they take a certain period of time longer than we would expect, we know they're probably reasoning, and if they're reasoning, they're trying to determine which answer will result in a greater value further down the line. And therefore, the quality of the response is less again. So just from an interface that our target audience is incredibly familiar with, you can build a huge amount of data. And of course, every time they're answering one of those questions, they're getting paid. And then they're allowed to connect external data. So the first integration that's already live in the app at the moment is email. So we point out to a person when they connect it, no human's going to read their emails, and no one's going to send emails on their behalf. All we're doing is asking questions to their email account. When was the last time Nick received an email from Uber.com with the word receipt in the subject line? And for every occurrence where that is true, we store a record of that in that user's profile. And from that, you might determine if I only get that 8 to 5 Monday to Friday that I use Uber for work. We don't need all of the data in our space to know that. We've just made the inference. And then the next ones that we'll be plugging in will be Spotify and HealthKit, because what we want to do is a little bit of a hack where, effectively, if we can determine you become more stressed as a result of certain emails from certain senders, and we know certain music styles relax you, we can actually change the environment around you just by changing the music in your Spotify playlist. So that'll be in a couple of weeks. But more importantly, for the target audience, they get paid. Now, where does all that money come from? It comes from one of the most inefficient industries in the world, advertising. It's my background. I used to work in it for all my sins, was only there a few years. But anyway, they throw 16 billion a year up against the wall in the UK alone. Now, when you split that over the UK population, it's £250 per person. So if you can take the advertising industry from third-party data to first-party, from high latency to low latency, and from audiences to individuals, you can now use the advertising industry to pay people to care about their data. So in this instance, McDonald's, for example, may send an advert through the platform. Now, McDonald's doesn't get any of the data. We're not a data management platform. We don't sell the data. That's a whole other weird space. We don't do any of that stuff. But McDonald's sends an advert to this person through the platform. Now, we actually say to them why they've received it. So based on the data and the assumptions we've made, we structure that into a phrase where the person will understand why they've even been sent it. Now, if they received it and it was bad targeting, they're able to check and validate that data, and that then trains our data model. But importantly, if they choose to engage with it, and I think you'll get the theory now, they get paid. So, as I say, we don't sell the data. In fact, the users own the data. If they delete their account, the data is hard deleted from our platform immediately. So the idea here is not to say to a person, we're stopping data being collected everywhere else, because the internet would simply shut down. We're relying on regulation and a variety of other areas to start that process. What we're doing to start with is simply saying there's actually a way of realizing a value for your data beyond simply using Google Maps as a quid pro quo. Now, we've been doing that. We've got about 30,000 people registered over the last number of months, and we get about 500,000 user interactions every month. We get about 40 to 50% retention, which is slightly weird. And we're working with 12 telcos across 35 markets, and the first one that'll be launching is O2 TBC. They keep changing their mind on the name. But in the next few weeks, we'll be launching an official O2 product in Germany for their 25 million customers who will be promoted out to. And the idea, Telefónica's #1 strategic priority, as you may have seen in the news recently, is to give data back. So we are seen as a tangible way of actually fulfilling that proposition to their customer base. So the future, kind of moving away from us into actually AI and things like that. The future is bleak. And I'll try and keep it light. I don't like ending on a bad note. We're all going to kind of fall apart. Anyway, first, second, and third-party data. First-party data, for the most part, for a company, is what data can I collect about you and put in my database. It's what George Clooney sells. It's what the NSA does. They collect your first-party data. Now, put your consumer hat on. First-party data is your data, not company's data. It should be your data. And to help give that example, I'm going to bring in Brooklyn Beckham, fresh-faced man of the industry. So if you take this example, he's using his phone to take a photo of himself. So his phone means he owns the mechanical rights to that image. It's his face in it, which means he owns the rights and the license to his likeness. It's his intellectual property. So in all different aspects, he owns the entire set of rights to that image. Now, that's like first-party data. If you look in a mirror and you describe yourself and you talk about something that you do, you should own that information. if a company wants to use that information for any purpose, they should make a license of it. And that's what Getty Images does. They have a library of images, and if a commercial entity wants to use that image for a commercial purpose, they pay a license fee on it. So that all makes sense. The difference now is second-party data, or what I would at least name second-party data. It's the intelligence that results from first or third-party data. To give you an example, Google Deepmind. And this is where it gets a little bit apocalyptic, but Google Deepmind. So if you were to say the value of an AI is largely determined by how intelligent it is, and the level of intelligence mostly derived from the data it gets access to train it, you take Google Deepmind that got a load of data from the NHS a while ago. Now the NHS gives them 500,000 patient records or something, and everyone says it's fine. The data is anonymized. Anyone that works in advertising knows what anonymization really means, which is nothing, but it's anonymized. It's fine, everyone's safe. Now, as a result of that, Deepmind may have become $50 million more valuable. In 5 years, it cures cancer, becomes $100 million more valuable. Sells the cure to a pharma company for $500 million, who then sell it back to the NHS for $1 billion. Who pays for the drugs from the NHS? It's the person who's in the bed, whose data was used anonymously to help cure cancer. So by anonymizing the data that you're now using in AI, to train the AI, you're creating a separation in the value chain. So very quickly, we'll go from a world where instead of it just being 1% of global population having 95% of global wealth, we'll very quickly get into a position where 95% of global intelligence, and therefore wealth and many other things, is held by 1% of global tech companies. And so unless a person starts to take more control of their data, we'll very quickly get to the point where there's no value to it. Because if you now look at the finance industry becoming the future of identity, identity moves away from your name, your date of birth, your address, into a collection of metadata that's associated to you as a physical entity in a context. So if you go outside and identify me, you don't say Nick, born on the 29th of August, you say Nick, long sleeve shirt, holding a microphone in the room downstairs. That's metadata about me in this context. The only entity that ever has that persistent view is you as the first party. So if your data and the metadata you create is now your identity, and what we're effectively saying is that simply by anonymizing it, you're giving it away. The example we just used about the AI that became so intelligent the person fell in love with it, that's because that AI actually knows more about you than you know about you. Because you gave that data to the AI to become intelligent without attribution. So the question is, who stays in control? Lovely happy image or dark image? And that's what we're doing. Thank you very much.